This is Naomi Goodlet's chronic fatigue recovery story. I never thought that I would be saying this. After 4.5 years suffering from post-viral chronic fatigue, here I am recovered, hiking, running, playing with my kids, going out on adventures all day, sleeping well at night, and free from pain. I am so incredibly grateful for my life and my body. There were many times that I thought the real me was gone forever and I would never find her again, but she's back. Now, a disclaimer before I move on. I'm sharing this story as inspiration for those who are looking to recover from CFS, ME, or other recoverable chronic illnesses. I'm aware that my CFS was not extreme or severe, and that I have been unbelievably fortunate to have access to support and funds to help me along the way. This story does not intend to contain any judgment for anyone who's suffering from chronic illness. Everyone's journey into illness and potentially out of it is different. It's not my intention to profit from people who are suffering from a chronic illness either. I am not a CFS recovery coach. I had my business before I experienced chronic fatigue. I have been writing since 2009, creating meditations since 2010, and working as a counsellor since 2011. There are many great CFS recovery programs and support people out there, and I encourage anyone listening to find a support system that you resonate with. When I got serious about recovering, I found recovery stories so inspiring and motivating. They gave me life, hope, drive to do whatever it would take. My intention with sharing this story is to provide hope and inspiration to those of you who find yourself seeking out recovery stories. If at any point you feel triggered or distressed, please stop listening and seek support. So it started with a whole lot of stress, a lifetime of unmanaged hypervigilance, and Epstein-Barr virus, commonly known as glandular fever. In 2018, I had a chronic EBV infection that didn't clear up for close to a year. If you'd like to read my story about how I recovered from EBV, you can read it on my website. I finally got on top of the virus, but I had several symptoms that lingered and became chronic fatigue syndrome. My main CFS symptoms were throat pain, swollen glands, sleep disturbances, joint pain, low energy, muscle pain, sinus, ear, and eye pain, brain fog, and crushing fatigue despite adequate rest. These symptoms would come on randomly without notice and were impossible to predict. At first, I tried to track my symptoms, to track my energy expenditure, my food intake, and my sleep. Many people with CFS do this in an attempt to manage energy and predict fatigue crashes. I had some moderate success, but sometimes I would be okay for 2 weeks, even when I had been quite active with restraint. And other times I would have a bad fatigue crash from very little exertion at all. There was no rhyme or reason to it, but I clutched to the belief that I could predict how I would feel so that I had some sense of control, when in reality, I didn't have any control. My life got smaller. Rest became my existence. Prior to my EBV infection and post-viral fatigue, I had been energetic, active, motivated, and committed to completing tasks. All of those traits were still inside of me, but my body wouldn't allow me to be me anymore. I would think of things that I wanted to achieve or do and just never find the energy to get them done. I would look at jobs that needed completing around my home and have no choice but to leave them undone. I would drive past the trailheads for some of my favorite hikes and hold back tears because I didn't know whether I would ever get to visit them again. Instead of playing with my young daughter, I would have to lay down and sleep. When fatigue would strike, talking was hard and moving was impossible. All I could do was nothing. As much as my reality was often unbearable, I found a way to keep going every day. I stayed home while my husband took our daughter to her friends' birthday parties. I rested every afternoon instead of working. The housework piled up, and I tried my best to participate in life, even though I usually felt tired, sore, or depressed. I got used to sitting and watching activities rather than participating in them. I would find a chair to sit on while everyone else stood and chatted. I would watch my family play through the window from my bed. Years went by like this. Then COVID hit. My stress skyrocketed. CFS is considered an autoimmune condition, which put me in the high-risk category, and every day I thought I was going to die. I had to reassess my work, as many people with chronic illnesses do. I scaled back my clients. I stopped creating content. I took an unfulfilling part-time job to supplement my income. And eventually, I decided that I wanted a change. My life had slowed down so much that I had time and space to think about what I truly wanted, and I decided to study psychology part-time. My YouTube channel, Insight Timer publishing schedule, and social media ground to a halt. I focused on studying at a slow and steady pace. This usually consisted of uni work in the morning, rest in the afternoon. I found a rhythm that worked for me. Along the way, I tried all the things to reduce my fatigue, increase my energy, and potentially recover. Here are some of the things that I tried while I was still sick. Supplements. I tried so many different supplements over the years. I've made a conscious choice not to list them all because I honestly think that supplements are a trap and often a waste of money. And I did come across a few that helped a small amount with managing symptoms, but overall, no supplement helped me recover fully. And when I published my blog post about recovering from EBV, I did list some of the supplements that I took, and for years since then, I've been getting messages and emails from strangers asking me about which supplements they should take. So I've decided not to list any. But ultimately, none of them helped me recover. And when I got serious about recovering, I gave up all of my supplements, and I still don't take any. The next thing I tried, meditation and visualization. As you may know from my EBV recovery journey, meditation helped me a lot. At the very least, meditating provided me with a sense of agency and control. But I do believe that visualizing myself without fatigue helped me to maintain hope that I could recover one day. My favorite practices were Tuning Into Your Quantum Potential by Caroline Stewart and A New Path of Light by Ariel Hecht. Both linked in the description below. I can't say that meditation healed me, but it helped me to maintain positivity and calm while I was suffering from CFS, and it helped me to stay focused while I was recovering. The next thing I tried, therapy. Now, this is a big one, probably the biggest for me. Without it, I would not have been in the most optimal state for recovery. I have a great deal of childhood trauma. I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse, rape as both a child and an adult, and I've been highly dysregulated since I was 4 years old. I was also shamed and blamed so much as a child that I had become an expert at shaming myself. Therapy has helped me to overcome so much over the years. The majority of my therapy was actually related to my trauma and abuse, which provided me with a stronger foundation to let go of my chronic hypervigilance state. I also had many sessions focused on coping with having fatigue, which helped me to manage the strong emotions that would come up, particularly sadness and frustration. The techniques that worked for me were EFT, Emotional Freedom Techniques, and IFS, Internal Family Systems. During this time, I asserted boundaries with toxic people in my life and experienced so many benefits, including greater resilience, feeling more peaceful, and letting go of many unhelpful beliefs about myself. Therapy did not heal my CFS in and of itself. However, I feel that without it, I would not have been ready to recover. Next thing down the list, diet changes. I know that plenty of people have good success with diet changes, and I'm genuinely happy for them. I think it's worth trying to see if any improvements can be found through refining food intake. For me personally, diet changes have never had any impact, not with my EBV infection and not with recovering from CFS. I won't go into the diet changes that I tried because at the end of the day, nothing changed my symptoms or helped me recover. Support groups. Support groups have their time and place. They can be a great way to feel like you're not alone in your experience, to get ideas for symptom management techniques to try, and just to simply feel validated and accepted. One of the biggest problems that people with invisible chronic illnesses face is that others don't believe them or understand that you're unwell. And the biggest perpetrators of disbelief in my experience were my own family. And this is the case for many CFS sufferers. There's an assumption that one day you'll wake up and just get over it. Living with CFS is hard enough, let alone losing your closest friendships and family relationships along the way. Another common assumption is that you've brought this on yourself, or if you just did XYZ, you'd recover. Classic spiritual bypassing and victim blaming. The support groups are a respectful space for you to talk about your struggles and gain support and acknowledgement without judgment from people who don't get it. As much as I really needed these groups for my sanity in the early days, in order to recover, it was essential for me to get out. These spaces are often about managing chronic illness and managing symptoms, not recovery. The next thing I tried, nervous system self-education. Most people with chronic illness seek out answers to the question, why? We want to understand how we ended up in this situation and make some meaning of it. There is a lot of great information out there these days about repairing your nervous system and making sense of how it can become dysregulated. I started watching free videos by Jessica Maguire, Irene Lyon, and Peter Levine about the connections between trauma, illness, sleep, stress, and how it all impacts your nervous system. I completed Jessica Maguire's vagus nerve program and implemented many of her techniques, but unfortunately, it did not lead to any improvement in symptoms. I was glad to have a deeper understanding of how and why my nervous system had been in overdrive for most of my life. But I did find that a lot of the content was quite depressing and felt a little bit like a life sentence. I still enjoy Jessica's content and find it very informative, but I've taken a step back from Irene Lyon, as she is heavily focused on selling her program. Therefore, the majority of her free content is about problems rather than solutions. I've also needed to take a break from Peter Levine, as I find his writing and videos too fluffy and not concrete enough to be used in a helpful way. That's just my personal opinion. I also read Decode Your Fatigue by Alex Howard, which is essentially just an advert for his Optimal Health Clinic program. I did do a free discovery call, but I didn't sign up for his program. But in his book were recovery stories. I loved reading recovery stories so much. After this, I just kept seeking them out everywhere I could. The last thing I wanted to mention was cold water exposure. Prior to getting serious about recovery, I did 12 months of cold water therapy, including daily cold showers and twice weekly cold swims, except for in midwinter. I can definitely attest to the invigoration of cold water immersion. However, it didn't have any lasting impact on my energy levels or frequency of fatigue. The pivot to recovery. In October 2022, I spent a drizzly day putting plants into a new garden bed outside my new home. I paced myself, I rested throughout, and I did most of it sitting down. But unfortunately, off the back of this activity, I ended up in a month-long fatigue crash that was my worst crash yet. I was crying constantly from pain. I could hardly talk, and all of my movements were as if I was moving in slow motion. Something inside me snapped. I decided that I didn't want to live with CFS anymore. I decided I wanted to be someone who had recovered. I had heard of a few random people who had recovered, but it didn't seem like the majority. To me, they seemed lucky, privileged, totally unrelatable. I knew that it was humanly possible to recover, but I had no idea what to do or where to start. I'm going to list now all the things that I did once I made the decision that I would recover. First, seek out recovery stories. Almost immediately, I started seeking out stories like this one, watching YouTube videos, reading blog posts, and listening to podcasts sharing recovery stories. I completely stopped consumption of any other content, including TV, and I switched 100% to CFS recovery content. Two channels that were pivotal for me were The Chronic Comeback and Raylan Agel, linked below. Both of them interview people who have recovered from chronic illness using a variety of methods. Every single journey is completely different and presents new ideas about how recovery might be possible. It was inspiring. Every day, I became more and more convinced that recovery wasn't just for a few lucky ones, and that I could get there too. Most of the interviewees now work in the recovery space, which opens up a door to find someone that you resonate with to support you on your recovery journey, if you choose to. I would have liked to see a few more regular folks and not just people profiteering from their recovery, but honestly, I was looking for some help with my journey, so I was grateful to have so many options open up to me. And this led to me choosing a recovery coach. I've actually since worked with two that I found from YouTube videos. Next, specialized support. I took a hiatus from my regular therapy and pivoted to working with a CFS recovery coach. I chose someone that I found on a YouTube recovery video. They helped me to dismantle some fundamental beliefs that were keeping me psychologically stuck. Talking to a support person who understands what you have been going through is everything. It's hard to describe how good it is to talk to someone who gets it. I only had a few sessions with this person, but I did all of my homework and rapidly felt the burden of CFS lifting, even though I still had fatigue at that point. Recovery program. From my research into recovery stories, I started to notice people mention a few different programs over and over again. I settled on 4 different options to choose from, ranging from online courses to group therapy to live workshops and audio practices. I didn't decide right away. I explored all of their YouTube content and looked at reviews and recovery stories from people who had completed the programs. I also factored in the amount of content to cover, the time commitment, and the cost. I did all of this research on my own, and I later realized that Liz Carlson, who also has a great recovery-focused YouTube channel, created a guide that collates feedback, pros and cons, and detailed information about what you get in 25 different recovery programs. If I was starting from scratch now, I'd start by reviewing her guide first, rather than doing all the groundwork myself. But after about 4 weeks of research, doing free discovery calls, and deliberating about which program to choose, I decided to go with the Lightning process. I made this decision for a few reasons. 1, it's completed in 3 days and doesn't require watching hours and hours of videos, so it's quick. 2, the price is very reasonable compared to many of the longer programs, good value. And 3, I had heard enough success stories, some with overnight healing taking place, to know that the prospects of recovery were pretty good. Efficacy. So I completed the 3-day training in person, which consisted mostly of psychoeducation and a small amount of practical somatic techniques. It's weird. I'm not going to lie, it's not for everyone, but it definitely worked wonders for me. If you'd like to see my in-depth critical review of the Lightning process, you can find it on my YouTube channel. After I completed the training, I did all of my homework, my journaling, all of the somatic techniques as instructed. And even though I recovered within a few weeks of completing the Lightning process training, I don't attribute my recovery to this alone. I did a huge amount of groundwork and research to get myself to a place where I believed that recovery was possible. I spent weeks doing self-guided EFT tapping on this belief alone. Also, my many years of trauma therapy ensured that I was not going to repeat the same patterns that got me sick in the first place. Soon after completing the Lightning process, I prioritized my health above everything else. I got serious about changing everything and rewiring my entire existence so that nothing was on autopilot anymore. Trauma Release Exercise, or TRE. I had heard about TRE for releasing trauma stored in the body. I knew I needed something like it. I had healed and soothed so much of the trauma in my past and had changed my habits and beliefs as a result, but I still felt so physically stuck. In researching TRE, I came across Liz Tenuto, aka the Workout Witch, and I resonated with her free content on Instagram about stored trauma and its related symptoms. I bought her Free Your Hips course prior to completing the Lightning process, but I didn't have time to start it until the weeks afterwards. The course, along with a 10% discount, is linked below. I did the exercises every day, and for the first 2 weeks, I would lie there thinking it was stupid. The movements were so small and so minimal, I kept thinking, how can this do anything at all? But I kept going with it, and even though I honestly thought in my mind that it was pointless, on day 16, I started shaking uncontrollably all over my body, and I didn't stop for about 10 minutes. It was exactly as I had seen in the TRE videos on YouTube. I didn't feel scared or distressed. In fact, I was completely calm, and afterwards, I felt good. I had learned from watching TRE videos that shaking is an effective way of releasing stored trauma. I've continued many of the TRE exercises, and sometimes I get big releases and sometimes I don't. After completing the course, I had access to more energy, I felt lighter, and I recovered within a few weeks. Like I said before, I don't attribute my recovery to one particular thing. TRE just happened to come along at the right time for me to support the other work that I was doing. Changing everything. This principle is taught in the lightning process, but also by many other experts on brain retraining, like Rick Hansen, who is here on Insight Timer, and Joe Dispenza. Essentially, trying to change one thing, i.e. fatigue, while in the same habits and the same neurology as you have been for ages can make it difficult for your body to actually change. This is because your body and mind prefer what is familiar, and it will do anything within its power to come back to homeostasis, to the way it has always been. You might have experienced this when trying to introduce a new eating or exercise habit. After a short time of success, sometimes you slip back into old patterns. I certainly have. Changing everything can help with this because the body is wiring new neural pathways for many things all at once, rather than just one thing. I gave it a go. I swapped sides of the bed and the bathroom with my husband. I altered where and how I got dressed each day. I sat in a different chair. I prepared food in a different way. I used my non-dominant hand to make tea. I started saying yes to things that I would normally decline. I switched up my nighttime routine, my vocabulary, my conduct, and I even got a weird asymmetrical haircut. When I committed to this, change was rapid. It was as if my body and my mind forgot how to have fatigue. Goal achievement and reconditioning. As I started to notice that I had longer periods of time without experiencing fatigue, and I became more skilled in shifting out of fatigue using somatic techniques, I started to explore what was possible for me. After years of staying home most of the time, walking or shuffling at a very slow pace, constantly looking for a chair to sit down on, leaving chores undone, and avoiding any strenuous activities, I reached a place where I could actually do things. Cleaning was a thrill. Carrying the washing from the laundry to the back of my house was exciting. Picking up kids' toys off the floor made me laugh with joy. When I had CFS, everything I did created stress, worry, and fear of a fatigue crash. Bending down to pick up things off the floor was one of my biggest stresses. Not anymore. One of the goals that I had set for myself during my recovery was to be able to charge up a hill. In my mind, meaning that I wanted to be able to walk up my steep street at a sprightly pace. And all of a sudden, I could do it. Then within days, I could do it pushing a 12-kilo toddler in a pram. No fatigue. My next goal was to take the kids out to a theme park for the whole day by myself. Another thing that I was able to do within a few weeks of feeling better. Only a few months prior, I struggled through a full day at Australia Zoo. I had walked with a slow shuffle, I had pain all over my body, and I was constantly looking for places to lie down. I was working with my coach at that point, so I had prepared for this day, but it was still so difficult. In comparison, taking 2 kids around Movie World for the day without the support of my husband was easy. I couldn't believe what I was experiencing. My biggest goal that I had held for over 4 years was to be able to hike again. Living in the Gold Coast hinterland with CFS was torture for me. All I wanted to do was to get out into that beautiful wilderness, and I couldn't, but I bought myself a cheap pair of secondhand hiking shoes and dug out my old backpack and decided to get out there. I started off with small 3 to 4 kilometre, mostly flat loop tracks. Afterwards, my feet would be aching and I couldn't move for an hour or two. Totally different from fatigue. This was exhaustion from exercise because I hadn't really been able to do much exercise for so many years. Then I built up quickly to 6 to 8 kilometres, and I stayed at this level for about 6 months. With each hike I did, I expanded my stamina and strength. My recovery time after each hike reduced too, and within 8 months of recovery, I was hiking 15-kilometre trails with ease and still having energy later in the day. This was a total dream come true. I was very aware of how deconditioned my body had become, so I slowly eased myself back into exercise. And as I'm recording this, I'm still in the process of building up my strength with Pilates, yoga, and HIIT training. Looking back, as I'm saying this, it's been about 8 months since I started to feel better. I still have things to work on, trauma to unravel, stress to reduce, and strength to build. But I'm a completely different person from who I was a year ago. It's been just over 12 months since that fatigue crash that started me on my journey, and now I'm exactly where I want to be. Looking back, I can see that I was lucky. Even though CFS dominated my life, I wasn't bedbound or even totally housebound. I was still able to drive my kids to school, do a load of washing from time to time, and attend low-key events if my husband drove and carried all of our stuff. I even somehow had a pregnancy and a baby in the middle of it all. All of the memories I have of things I did during that time that I was unwell are clouded with pain and struggle. Whenever I now go to a place that I once went to when I had fatigue, I get flashes of how difficult it was for me the last time I was there. I have visceral memories of the numbness, the heaviness, the pain, the weakness, the difficulty. And now I can walk, I can stand, I can think, I can carry stuff, and I can even drive there without help and with a toddler in tow. I hope that you've found something helpful to support you on your journey from this story. I have so much more to share, but I'll leave it here for now. If I had to boil down everything that I've learned from my journey into 3 simple steps, it would be this. 1. Decide and commit to recovery. Don't wait for a miracle like I spent years doing. 2. Get support. Both CFS-focused and general therapy are equally important and helpful. 3. Follow what works for you. Everyone's journey is different. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Sending so much love to you. Bye.